Hello and good day, everyone. Welcome to the Live Life Conference 2021. I am Bo. I am RJ Moriones, a lay missionary for the Live Christ Share Christ mission, serving in the Live Life pillar. Family is an important component of society and of the church. It is the primary unit of communities and it is the domestic church. That is why in this conference, we wanted to highlight the family and how it can be a source of love and life to every individual, to the community, and to the world. There are many reasons to celebrate this year, even if we are still in the pandemic. The crisis we are in right now will not dampen our spirits to know more about the plan of God for ourselves and for our families. We are happy to share with you this event that will highlight our desire to be a gift to others and our eagerness to celebrate the beauty of marriage, family, and life. The pandemic will not stop us in proclaiming the gospel of life to everyone. We, in Live Life, are empowered by the Holy Spirit to become God's beacon of light to the ends of the earth. As we celebrate 500 years of our Christian faith, and as we observe the Amores Laetitia Family Year, we bring to you the Live Life Conference 2021 Sessions on Demand. We created Sessions on Demand videos to help appreciate the beauty of marriages and family, and to develop a society that embraces the culture of life. We want everyone, yes, to be empowered with the truth as we all respond to the constant attack of evil forces against families. We want all of you to appreciate the beauty of life and respond by sharing this gift to everyone. As you watch at the comfort of your homes, we want you to open your mind and heart to everything that will be shared and revealed to you. Be assured that the speakers were handpicked and they are the best in their fields to discuss the topics presented. It will be an exciting opportunity to learn. We have prepared two segments for the workshop: the culture of life and the culture of death. In the culture of life segment, we will highlight ways on how we can build up a strong family for Christ and empower everyone to embrace the gospel of life at home. And as for the culture of death, we will enlighten everyone about the realities of this culture that opposes God's way for families and marriages. We will offer to our participants ways on how to address these issues and become a light to everyone. We promise you that these online sessions will help and equip us to further the mission of proclaiming the gospel of life to everyone. Let us be bearers of God's light to the world. Let us lead everyone back home so that they may see God's amazing love and beautiful plan for every family. Have a grace-filled day ahead of you. Enjoy and God bless.
A blessed day. I am EDWIN Valles of the Courage Apostolate, the Catholic apostolate for persons with same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns. So I am very honored and blessed to be a participant in this Live Life conference for 2021, and I was asked to talk about or to expound on the theme pastoral accompaniment of persons with same-sex attraction within the family context. So, I mean, why am I doing this? So I am part of Courage. So I am a person who experienced same-sex attraction himself, and the ministry that I'm involved with talks about or listens to stories of persons like me. So journeying through their faith, and in that listening aspect, we somehow discover some insights that we hope are helpful to you as we share them. So the reason why we're doing that is this is part of the apostolic exhortation of Pope Francis entitled Amoris Laetitia. So one paragraph in that long document specifically addresses this need for accompaniment of persons with same-sex attraction within the family context. It can be found in paragraph 250, and in that document, Pope Francis said, during the synod, so referring to the synod and the family, we discuss the situation of families whose members include persons who experience same-sex attraction, a situation not easy either for parents or for children. And such families should be given respectful pastoral guidance so that those who manifest a homosexual orientation can receive the assistance they need to understand and fully carry out God's will in their lives. So it is the desire of Pope Francis that every member every member of the family experience same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns be accompanied even within the context of the family. And so this is why we're trying to do this. No? So as already mentioned, I belong to Courage, Philippines, and in our apostolate, this like any typical Catholic community, we have a regular sharing meeting. No? So in that particular sharing meeting, every member of Courage is able to share and to talk about their struggles with homosexuality, with their same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns. So they're able to do this in a Catholic church setting without feeling judged or misunderstood, because every participant in that sharing session is they're also experiencing what they're going through. No? So, and the other beautiful part of that sharing meeting is that it is always with the presence of a priest. So we always have a priest chaplain who listens to us, who represents the church as a mother, and the church who is present and always caring for all of us. And that priest, by his very person, also provides spiritual fatherhood, no, in the model of the fatherhood of Saint Joseph. So this is why my background has his image. No? So okay. So in that course of sharing, so every member of Courage will eventually discover, so as they unload on their burdens of their same-sex attraction, as they share of their experiences and their struggles with such a powerful emotional experience, eventually the member of Courage discover what are the triggers or what could have caused their same-sex attraction. So typically when we talk about homosexuality within the Catholic setting, the usual things that a typical Catholic person will talk about will be homosexuality as a form of gender ideology. It is an objective disorder, as what the Catechism tells us, that homosexual attraction is a tendency towards lustfulness. It's often that the Bible passage of Sodom and Gomorrah from the book of Genesis is quoted. Then that sense of a man identifying as a woman is a sense of false identity, and then there's such a thing as a mind and body divergence. And again, quoting from the Catechism, when we talk about the homosexual act itself, it is considered as intrinsically evil. So again, whenever the topic of homosexuality is discussed within Catholic circles, these are the usual things that come out. So these are all important, and they are also part of the Catholic tradition. So, but what we find out, so that from listening to the stories and accompanying persons with same-sex attraction within Courage, is that while all these topics and themes about homosexuality are important, they're only but tip of the iceberg. So yes, this catechetical moral understanding of homosexuality is important, but they're only addresses, or they only depict the tip of the iceberg. So what the homosexual experience is about is much more than all these catechetical and moral things. So what we find out in the sharing meeting in Courage is that every LGBT person, every person with same-sex attraction may have had a parent issue, so while growing up. And this parent issue can cover a whole range of topics. We can talk about absentee parenting, so yung mga parents who are overseas, for example, or yung mga parents na sumakabilang bahay, diba? So, or who left their family for another family or another woman or another man. So And so members of courage who have had this experience, there's this deep feeling of abandonment, and so they tend to crave for a fatherly or motherly affection that they were not able to fully accomplish while growing up due to circumstances that are not within their control. No? So that's a big chunk of the story about the homosexual experience. Another aspect of that is some of the members of courage were not able to experience positive affirmation from their parents. No? So their parents might have been too rigid or too strict or too critical about their behaviors. And so, but every child, every person needs to have this sense of affirmation. No? So sadly, due to circumstances beyond their control, they were not able to fully accomplish that sense of affirmation that every person needs. No? So some things, some people experience that when while they were young, they were having some gender insecurity. So either they have a brother or a sister who was getting a lot of attention, and whose abilities they do not share. No, so they have a different set of abilities, and yet their older brother or sister tend to get all the attention, while their own sets of skills and competencies are not as recognized. So they develop that gender insecurity. I mean, and typically, there we have to be realistic that there will be boys and girls that show atypical boy or girl behaviors respectively, and so. But that does not necessarily mean that they're gay or lesbian. No, so but then again, society and the people around them tend to make them feel insecure for having atypical behaviors, for displaying atypical behaviors. Uh, and then another common cause, aside from these three that I mentioned, are some boys or girls are bullied while growing up, and so they develop this sense of fear of masculinity or femininity while growing up, and so they tend to isolate themselves from instead of being encouraged to interact with peers of the same sex. No, so sadly, it is also quite a common cause that several members of courage also experienced sexual abuse while they were young. No, so often the abuse tend to be with the same sex. So when we talk about boys, they were being molested by their uncles, by sometimes their fathers, their own fathers, their relatives, their neighbors, sometimes priests themselves, and so they feel traumatized by this sexual abuse experience. No, so but the thing is, even if instinctively they know that what is being done to them at that point is wrong, simultaneously they experience physical pleasure and stimulation, and so they get confused whether this particular sexual act is it good or bad. No, so they grow up being confused about it, and they have a tendency to repeat or to seek after that physical stimulation that they experienced when they were young. Or for example, for girls, no, they were molested by boys or men, then they have this a tendency to develop this fear of men. No, so they have this as a way of coping. They wanted to act more manly so that they will not feel vulnerable, no, and fear to be taken advantage of by men. So because they are perceived to be weak. So sometimes a lot of church members just have a difficulty of adjusting socially. So I think we have to recognize that there are people who are introverted, for example, or who really do not enjoy a lot of social interaction, or that do not have the energy to be able to pursue that. And then finally, one common cause is a lack of role model. So for whatever circumstance, the boy did not have positive male role models in his life growing up, nor the girls did not have positive female role models while growing up. And so how can we expect these people to become a man or a woman? No? So if the father was not a good example of masculinity, or the mother was not a good example of femininity. And so with all these, so these parent issue, lack of affirmation, gender insecurity, victim of bullying, sexual abuse victim, social maladjustment, and lack of role models are but some of the reasons why people develop same-sex attraction. And sadly, the typical church reaction, we just want to focus on the catechetical moral stuff. So, but where more of us are needed, where more Catholic faithful are needed, is to address these issues, these underlying deep woundedness of these people. No? So, and to be able to address these deep wounds, for example, of a sexual abuse experience, you need time, you need effort, you need a lot of patience. And it's not a quick fix solution as simply reading to them Sodom and Gomorrah and hope that they will eventually get it. So it doesn't really work that way. So just like an iceberg, we need more Catholic people. So instead, not just addressing the tip of the iceberg, but the more substantive, submerged part of the iceberg. What this connotes for us is that this idea of sexuality is more complex and it is affected by several factors. No? And so this is also actually what the church or how the church understands what sexuality is. In the Catechism, paragraph 2332, it says that sexuality affects all aspects of the human person in the unity of his body and soul. It especially concerns affectivity, the capacity to love and to procreate, and in a more general way, the aptitude for forming bonds of communion with others. So when the church looks at sexuality, one's human sexuality, it understands that this sexuality is a complex phenomenon, and this sexuality concerns affectivity, capacity to love, and in a general way, the aptitude for forming bonds of communion with others. So when we pay attention to the words that the church uses to describe what sexuality is, we can have a sense of understanding that sexuality requires some form of capacity building. So, for example, so we all know from Catholic teaching that sex can happen between one male and one female. So let's assume that the male is a 1-year-old boy and the female is a 1-year-old girl. Can they already have sex? Of course, by human reason alone, we will say no. They should not engage their sexual faculties, no, because they're still young. No? So even in this clear illustration, we already know that a human person has to go through a growth and development process first before they engage their sexual faculties. No? So then, really, we understand where the church is coming from when it describes sexuality. Yet, again, the Catholic moralists tend to look at homosexuality to be just a one-time thing. Therefore, a person who experiences same-sex attraction can instantly change himself or herself. No? So we need to understand that whatever that person experiencing now is a result of a cumulative experience that is built across a lifetime. No? So therefore, to be able to address that, then it takes a lot of time and patience and effort as well to be able to address the deep woundedness behind it. So, but when we talk about this sense of capacity building within the context of family, I propose that all of these can be addressed in a family context through parenting or parenthood. Now, all of these all boils down to good parenting and effective parenthood. So when we talk about parenting and also formation, specifically, what a lot of social scientists are saying is that when it comes to formation, there are three aspects that are important. So we can look at these three aspects as three legs in a tripod. So like a tripod, for that tripod to stand, you need to be sure that each of the legs are strong and stable enough. So the first part of formation, or the first leg of formation, is what is known as cognitive formation. So this is when parents try to form their children to think properly. So to form them in terms of developing their cognitive skills, which involves knowledge, skills, problem solving, and dispositions. So that's the first leg. The second leg of formation talks about behavior. So a good parent will ensure that their children grow up or receive proper behavioral formation. So these concerns actions, reactions, presentation, and movement. But the third leg of that tripod, in terms of formation, is what is known as affective formation. So, or the formation of one's affection, or the formation of our children's affection. So this talks about emotion, expression, responsiveness, and attraction. And so, when we talk about good parenting, typical of our typical understanding of parenting is that a good parent will have valedictorian children. So their children do well in school. No? So, and then when we talk about good parents, we can say na, oh, their children are well behaved. No? So, but when we talk about good parenting, we don't necessarily talk about children loving properly, or parang loving fully or selflessly. No? Here we can see that there's the affective leg of formation is not given its due and proper and proportionate attention as that of the cognitive formation and the behavioral formation. And why is that? So how can that be? So what we need to understand is that it is also the duty of parents to form their children's affections. These three are all important. Again, when we go back to parenting specifically, when we talk about cognitive parenting, or forming our children when it comes to their cognitive skills, then we talk about learning, academics, and language. And then when we talk about behavioral formation of parents to their children, we talk about discipline, good manners and right conduct, and setting boundaries for their children, so that they will grow up to understand that they cannot be just doing whatever they please to do. And then in terms of affective formation that is expected of parents, we talk about bonding, making them feel affirmed within the family, and making them experience love, and also being models of love themselves. So these are equally important as the cognitive and behavioral aspects of formation. When do we start doing the affective formation of our children? So actually from the very start. So again, looking at science, and specifically looking at the brain development of a child, of a person, as soon as the child is born, diba? So in terms of the brain development, what gets developed actually first is from the lower and back part to the top and front part. So that's how the human brain develops. So from the early stage at birth, so the brain stem, there's already a need for the infant to have a feeling of being emotionally and physically safe. So nandun na, from the very start, there's already a need for the brain, for the infant to have this sense of physical and emotional safety. So that's already part of the brain development. And then after the brainstem, the cerebellum develops after, from birth to 1 year. There's a need for the infant to have that interaction with the parents. So it says here, take me to playgrounds and swimming pools, dance with me. When we talk about the temporal lobe and limbic system, it says that the need of the infant, so this temporal lobe and limbic system develops from birth up to 2 years for the limbic system and 6 years to temporal lobe. It says here that the infant demands that you show me unconditional love. So it means that both the father and the mother tends to their needs, diba? So tend to show selfless type of love, so unconditional love. That child is loved for his or her own sake. So, and then when it comes to the occipital lobe, it says here that the need for the child is for that child to feel surrounded. So then we talk about the presence of the parents, so which is as important. And then progressively during the birth to 6 years, the parietal lobe, the touch aspect of the brain, says here, touch me, hug me, hold my hand, massage me. So there's a lot of physical contact required at this particular stage. And then when it comes to the parietal lobe, which involves the language, It says here, talk to me, sing to me, read to me. So there's need for a lot of parent-child interaction during this stage. During the development of the frontal lobe, talking about concrete thinking, so this is from 3 to 12 years old, it says here, encourage me to do problem solving. So aside from developing cognitive skills and behavioral skills, there's also this sense of encouragement. So then we talk about affectivity, affective approaches, diba? So again, they need to feel affirmed, diba? With whatever they can do, diba? So if they can only do at this point, they need to be encouraged to give some more, diba? Or to do better. So then you talk about more effective approaches to formation. And finally, the last part of the brain that develops is the prefrontal cortex. So that involves judgment. So this develops during 12 to 22 years. So even what we know to be the adolescent phase of our children, at this particular stage, no. So it says here that the child or the teenager needs to have this engagement with their parents. It says here, talk to me about plans, no? So allow me to participate in family life or cancel me out, no? Or just disregard me, no? So I'm already beginning to become an adult more and more, to be more independent, especially during the teenage years, no? During the so-called rebellious phase, no? So but the parents should continue to engage their children and to make them feel that they are participant in the family life. They need to be continuously engaged in family life as this part of the brain develops. So as you can see, at every stage of a child's life, there is need for affective formation. And yet, again, a lot of the times, the parents tend to just focus on the cognitive part and the behavioral part. So even when we talk about another psychologist, so Eric Erikson, he also looked at the different stages of the psychosocial development of children and identify every stage to be with some sort of crisis or tension. So from infant to 18 months, there's this tension between trust and mistrust. No? So can I count on my parents to take care of me and to attend to my needs when I need them to? Then at this particular stage, the child resolves this issue between trust or mistrust. No? So, and then 18 months to 3 years, according to Eric Erikson, there's a tension between autonomy versus shame and doubt. No? So, naturally, during this time, the child discovers a lot of things. No? It depends on how the parent reacts to that discovery. Then the child resolves this issue. Either the child is encouraged to do things independently, so to be more autonomous, or to experience this shame and doubt, especially for the parents who are extremely critical, no? Who will form their children with a series of no's. No, don't do this, don't do that, etc., etc. So they develop this shame or doubt during this particular stage. Progressively, 3 to 5 years, there's this tension between initiative and guilt. So again, it depends on how the parents form their children. No? So if they're very severe, then they tend to develop a guilt complex. No? So by their parents, and then so there has to be a good balance, no, between the affective with the behavioral and the cognitive formation of parents. No? So and then 5 to 13 is industry versus inferiority. 13 to 21 is identity versus role confusion. So even at this particular age, there's this creative tension. No? So between self-identity and role. No? So this is when human persons naturally question their sense of identity and their role in life. No? So parents are needed at this particular stage. No? So they need to be affirming, they need to be encouraging. So while their teenage children go through this tension in their lives. What I would like to highlight is that more than what needs to be said, and more than addressing behavior of children, what I would like to underscore is to explore more effective approaches. So just again, going back to the iceberg picture. So again, when we talk about the catechetical moral aspects, we're trying to solve cognitive issues or behavioral issues. But what same-sex attraction is, what gender identity is. So both of these are affective concerns. No? And what we need to address is affective in nature. And based on our experience and courage, yung cognitive approach and behavioral approach to an affective need does not fully address the issue. So even within the context of the family, so as soon as a boy displays a typical behavior, normally the parents will go for cognitive solution. So they will say, you tend to be effeminate. The church does not like you to be effeminate. Stop acting like that. So, or the parent will address it by a behavioral means. No? So you're a boy, you should act like a man. Stop doing that, and I will punish you for displaying effeminate behavior. So, but what we're trying to say is that that particular display of a typical behavior can be addressed, or specifically, for example, if a boy displays effeminate behavior, can be addressed by affective means, no, or by addressing affective formation. Why is this boy, why is my young son developing effeminate behavior? Is it because I, as a father, is not a good example to him? Is it because I, as a father, does not have that positive bonding with him? And so my child, my son, does not want to emulate me in the way I act? Is my behavior off-putting or is scary to my son? Or is my wife, am I as a mother trying to dominate family life? No, so such that I'm trying to emasculate my husband. So my young son does not look at his father positively. These are the questions that we need to be asking. No? So in that particular specific case. So again, what I would like to highlight is that same-sex attraction or gender identity concerns are affective in nature, and they are best addressed by affective means or approaches. So at any given stage, this is what parents need to be cognizant at. So when it comes to addressing the issue or the concern with their children. But also it's important, so when we talk about addressing the affective needs of our children, we also be, as parents, cognizant of our own affective needs. No? We need to remember that at some point of another, we all have this sort of woundedness. No? So when we talk about parenting, we also need to talk about what are the inputs to parenting. So again, borrowing from a social scientist, so this particular model proposes that there are 6 important inputs to parenting. So first input to parenting is the individual developmental history. So what we need to understand is you as father and mother were once children. So you were also a recipient of the affective formation of your own parents, no? So, or lack thereof. So you need to understand that your fatherhood and motherhood is as a result of how you receive fatherhood and motherhood to be. No? So that's an input to parenting. So that's the first. That's the second is the individual personality. So the individual personality has a way of becoming their own father and mothers as well. No? So that's as well as an input to parenting. A third input is marital relations. So how the husband and the wife interact with each other. So the type of and quality of relationships that they have also affects how they parent their children. It's not unusual that whenever there's tension between the husband and wife, they tend to use their children as collateral damage, diba? In that pattern. So it's important to be cognizant of this. The fourth input to parenting is work. So the work situation also affects and impacts how we deal with our children. So whether we are being encouraged or discouraged at work, or if there's tension at work, then we have a tendency to bring it over to how we deal with our children. The fifth input to parenting is social network. So depends on the network of fathers and mothers that we develop for ourselves. So obviously, if we have friends who are also good fathers and mothers, then we can learn from them on how to effectively farm our children. So it goes the other way as well. And then 6, input to parenting is also the individual characteristics of our children, because how every child will be unique in their own way, and so how they react to our parenting is also an input to our parenting style, no, or approach, no. So how they react to us is a feedback on the adjustments that we may need to make as parents. So again, just to summarize it all up, no, so when it comes to your children or your loved ones who are experiencing same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns, what we need to understand is that it is a display or a manifestation of a deep need for affection. So the best way to address and accompany that is to approach it via affective means. Diba? So if they're children or if they're 18 and below, if they're minors, then that means that we need to focus more on affective formation. So there. I hope that this very brief exposition and help and insight is helpful to you in terms of addressing your loved ones who are experiencing same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns. And then finally, if you're interested, the Courage Apostolate, within the Courage Accompaniment umbrella, we have what is known as Encourage Apostolate. So Encourage is the support community for parents, siblings, children, and other relatives and friends of person experiencing same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns. So this is a spiritual support community for such people whose loved ones are LGBT persons. So you can, if you're interested to find out more about Encourage and to join Encourage, feel free to contact Encourage via our Facebook page, Encourage Philippines. So until then, we invoke the help in the intercession of Saint Joseph, Pillar of Families, as well as his beloved spouse, Mary, the Queen of Families, to intercede for our families with whatever we're going through. So if we have children and loved ones who experience same-sex attraction and gender identity concerns, we need to understand and remember that they are also children of God. So because they're children of God, God the Father also has plans for them, which are bigger than our own plans. So again, this is Edwin Valles of Courage Philippines. Thank you for listening to this talk. God bless.